cell phones or put them on silent, please. Interment will take place at Washtenaw Memorial Park Cemetery. The cemetery is located on the corner of Whitmore Lake Road and Stein Road. We do have directions out on the table in the foyer. Family and friends will be gathering following interment at the Stone Chalet Ann Arbor at 1917 Washtenaw Avenue in Ann Arbor until 5 o'clock. It is suggested that those who wish to further honor the memory of Yuriy Mushkin may do so by making a contribution to the Jewish National Fund Plant a Tree.
לכל זמן וילכו חפץ תחת השמיים, עת ללדת ועת למות, עת לטעת ולקורנה טובה, עת להרוג ועת לרפוא, עת לפרוץ ועת לבנות, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, עת צפות ועת רקוד. Words of Kohelet. There's a time set for everything under heaven, time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering them up, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for seeking, a time for losing, a time for keeping, a time for discarding, a time for ripping, and a time for sewing back up, a time for silence and a time for speaking. This is one of those times for mixtures of silence, but also speaking, and a time for ripping, as the family has just ripped the ribbon, ripped a little part of themselves in heartbreak, as we are here to commemorate the life and love of Dr. Yuriy Mushkin. Our deepest condolences go out to the family. Our condolences to, of course, almost 70 years of marriage, to Ina. Our condolences to Lena and to Alexander, to Sasha. Our condolences to David and Toma, to Tamara, to Mikhail and Dmitry, to Andre and Konstantin, and Ella, and also, of course, the broader Mushkin family in the United States, Canada, Germany, and Israel, and across the globe, and to the many friends who are also experiencing this service today in the sanctuary and by streaming. Psalm 15. Mizmor LeDavid. Mi yagor b'halecha, mi yishkon b'har kodshecha. Holech tamim v'foel tzedek, dover emet b'lavavo. Lo ragal al leshono, lo asa l're'ehu ra'a, v'rachapa lo nasa al krovo. Yivzeh be'einav, nim'as be'et yirei Adonai yichabed, mishpa lahara v'lo yamir. Kaspo lo natan l'neshach, shochad al naki lo laka, ose'ela lo yimot lo olam. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Do we merit a place in the presence of Adonai? Live with integrity, do what is right, speak the truth without deceit. Have no evil speech upon your tongue, and do no evil to others. Do not mistreat your neighbor. Stay away from a contemptible person, but honor those who revere Adonai. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates, accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, and then you shall stand firm forever at the side of Adonai. The main part of the Jewish memorial service is the speaking. And we begin that at this time. And we will begin with David and Toma, and then Lena. And then we're going to switch and do our best to include those who are streaming the service as well, and I will announce those names at that time. Yes.
Our grandfather passed away last Friday. When I told my colleague that our grandfather had passed, one of them wrote, David, if you had asked your grandfather to predict what his family would become when he was a young man, there's no way he would have imagined all that you all have accomplished. This weekend, I pondered just how true those words were. Diedushka lived a long, meaningful, and full life. It took him from Kharkiv to Pushkin, through evacuation and Karelia, to Detroit and to Israel and to Toronto and to Runnymede, England, and many places in between. It saw him go from a close escape in the early days of World War II and a brush with Soviet terror, to raising not one, but two doctors, one of whom is a globally renowned surgeon. He had a grandson who is himself a well-regarded surgeon, a granddaughter who worked as a lawyer in the White House, and one of his great-grandchildren recently had a piece of art exhibited at a local art museum. But this is but a minuscule sample, because if we were to recount all of the successes of the Mushkin family, we would be here next Monday. Diedushka was so proud of us all. So yes, I highly doubt that in 1953, when he graduated medical school, Diedushka would have imagined a fraction of all of this. But how did we get here? Yuriy Mushkin was born in Kharkiv, USSR in 1930. He came from a family that was modestly wealthy before the revolution, but which was made poor by the Soviet government. He grew up in a tight-knit but amazing family. He and his beloved brother Marek, who was Diedushka's partner in mischief and among Diedushka's closest friends throughout his life, were raised by their father, Velvo Mushkin, and mother Sonia, but the family was rich in love, with many aunts, uncle, cousins, etc. Not long after Diedushka was born, the nuclear family moved to Leningrad in search of opportunities. Those opportunities disappeared in 1941 with the start of World War II. Diedushka was among those who was evacuated, a small miracle right there. Evacuation was reserved only for senior military officers and their families. And our family was not among that group. A senior officer who was a friend of our Diedushka's father registered our great-grandmother Sonia as his own sister, permitting Sonia to be evacuated with her sons, Yuriy and Marek. Their train was the last train. The next train was bound. Evacuation was hard. They lived with different family members, trying to claw together a way to survive. But survive they did. At the end of the war, they returned to where they came from, Pushkin. Diedushka applied to medical school and was admitted. It was there that he would meet his wife, with whom he would spend the next 69 years. They graduated medical school in 1953, just in time for the doctor's plot, a time when the Soviet government accused Jewish doctors of trying to poison Soviet officials. Diedushka's professor was arrested. Fearing prosecution himself, my grandparents moved to Karelia. If you don't know where that is, don't feel bad. I only recently learned that it is next to Finland and not in Siberia. Life was tough. A fact made clear to me many years later when I lived in Harlem and was dealing with a rodent infestation. And our grandfather gave me advice on how to exterminate them by using electrocution wires, a lesson he learned in Karelia. After several years there, my grandfather and grandmother came back to Pushkin. Back in Pushkin, Dedushka became a well-regarded pediatrician, known for his care of his patients. To give but one example, after saving one child's life by a quick and early diagnosis of meningitis, the mother of the child was so grateful to our grandfather that she would send him a cake every year, literally for decades. He had 2 kids, Liana and Sasha. Inspired by their father, each became a doctor themselves. My mom qualified as a cardiopediatrician. My uncle became a surgeon. His house hosted the gatherings of the Mushkin clan, which grew over time as Nadia, Alla, Sonia, Lade, Nida, and so many others joined. Many Mushkin's relatives are with us today, either in person or via Zoom. But even more are unable to be here, and they are in our thoughts, and in some cases, in our prayers. The family was always important to Dedushka, and he supported everyone however he could, through his sense of humor, his advice, his support, and his guidance. In the 1980s, they obtained a dacha in Luga, where Dedushka planted various fruits and vegetables. For many of us, this is where we first tried red or black currant, a taste many of us miss today. The 1980s also brought grandchildren, 4 of them, and Dedushka enjoyed spoiling them all. In 1989, 2 of their grandchildren would leave the USSR for exotic locale of Southfield, Michigan, following Marik's footsteps earlier, who had left for Toronto. Dedushka and Babushka would follow 4 years later in May 1993.
Dedushka, Babushka, and Prababushka Sonia settled in Oak Park, Michigan. It was closer to Dedushka's beloved brother Marek and his family in Toronto, and obviously much closer to us. For me, when Babushka, Dedushka, and Prababushka Sonia came to America, came as a bit of a shock. You see, I was 5 years old at the time, and it felt like I was far too independent to have 3 more adults to tell me what to do. But Dedushka quickly helped me to get over my reservations about having a new authority figure around. And that is because Dedushka quickly became the most fun person in our family, which was sometimes all too serious. He loved to laugh. He loved to laugh at your jokes, at TV jokes. He loved to laugh especially at his own jokes. And when you see pictures of him, you can often see a sly grin, as though when he was told to smile for photos, he had something mischievous to be smiling about. Our parents would drop us off to Babushka and Dedushka's for days or weeks at a time, and I often stayed there for extended periods in the summers. I slept between Babushka and Dedushka summer after summer, and Dedushka would tell me stories to help me fall asleep or quiz me in geography until I relented and went to sleep myself. In the daytime, Dedushka would let me choreograph dances for us and prance around until I was exhausted. Dedushka, mischievous as he was, would never tattle on us to our parents when we were bad. And when my brother totaled my parents' car while they were away on vacation, Dedushka negotiated the terms of his surrender and ensured that my parents wouldn't be too hard on him. When David and I would leave their apartment, Dedushka wouldn't just walk us to the door. He would walk us outside the apartment. He would walk us into the car. And then sometimes he would follow the car as it drove off. And he would wave the entire time, making eye contact until the car had turned enough corners that it was completely out of sight. What Dedushka always loved was an extended goodbye, and we'll be doing that in our own way now. As we were growing up, we saw our Dedushka dive into history with great interest, particularly British history. In this regard, to say he was industrious is an understatement. He wrote a book attempting to explain America to other people from the former Soviet Union And he also wrote chapters on British history, particularly the Magna Carta. He was an active student and an active teacher, and he delighted in both roles. He also tried to see as much of the world as he could, which also gave him an excuse to see the now far-flung Mushkin clan. In the last 30 years of his life, he went to France, Israel, England, the Dominican Republic, Hawaii, Washington, Philadelphia, lots of cruises, lots of places. And he'd always come back with stories that he shared with us and his group of friends in Oak Park, with whom he continued to discuss books, politics, history, and many other things. And that is why COVID was so hard on him. He wanted to travel, but he couldn't, and he wasn't getting any younger. So over the objections of some, including some of us standing here right now, he continued to travel, going to Arizona, Great Lakes, and all over Michigan. Then less than a year ago, about 11 months, my brother and I took our grandpa to the United Kingdom, and we genuinely could not keep up with him. We went to 3 museums a day, and after we'd finish one spot, he'd say, "Where are we going next?" As my brother likes to joke, there is no stone at Westminster Abbey that he did not examine personally. We almost missed Isaac Newton's grave, but Yuriy insisted, because he had studied about where it was, and we kept looking and we found it. He also really wanted to see Runnymede, which is what my brother was alluding to earlier. And specifically, that's a place where the Magna Carta was signed. Now, this place is not a museum. It is a monument in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere, about 70 minutes outside of London. But Yuriy wanted to go, and so we went. We walked the 30 minutes through a field and got there, and Yuriy was so happy. As a historian, he had hit another milestone. And as a grandfather, I think he was just amused at what he could get us to do. Last month, Yuriy went on his last trip. He went with our mom and babushka to Florida, where he took walks to catch the beach sunsets. For all these reasons, this is why his sickness and his passing, even at 92 years old, felt really sudden. Yuriy was a fighter. He had been sick. In fact, shortly after coming to America, Yuriy had a triple bypass surgery, but he was full of life and he fought for it. He quit smoking, he reduced drinking, he tried to stay healthy, although he always was delighted when he could sneak a sausage, sorry, Rabbi, or a little bit of vodka. But this time he knew he wasn't going to win the fight. And the truth is that Yuriy would have hated anything but a clean break. He would not wanted to have made the adjustments required to extend his life. He didn't want to be connected to machines, and he would have struggled being unable to live life to the fullest on his own. So in this really challenging time, we are comforted that he got to avoid those things. We will miss Yuriy very much, and we will treasure our many memories with him. And we will take our time now to say goodbye in an extended way, as he would have wanted us to.
I just wanted to explain what my father was to me through all the years. So I remember him like as a person, probably from my 2-year-old. And I remember my feeling that he really loved to be with me. We went together to the park, to the gardens, later went to the lake to swim, go with my brother to some trails, and he always loved it. And regardless what it was, vacation or some work like plucking weeds or picking berries, it always was fun because we all were together. He taught us to play cards, to play badminton, to play different games, so it would be never boring to spend time together. He worked double shifts in a hospital to make payments for my figure skater lessons, my music lessons, and my brother's music lessons, for my English lessons when I was a child. They paid for our preparation lessons for the medical school. So when we graduate from the school, we were much better graduates than average Soviet student. And it's helped us to proceed in life with everything we wanted, what was possible in Russia. So he and my mom made us to like travels, go to the theaters, to the museums, and they made us to like to do it together. He was a great family man. He took care of his grandmother who lived almost until 94, and he took care of my mother after she had 3 strokes and was really sick. He took care of her almost until last month, and he never complained. He refused to have help from people from outside, and only I was allowed to help a little bit, but he wanted to be independent. He loves his brother, he loves his nieces. As David said, they knew that if they will need help, maybe it's not material, but they always could count on his advice, his love, his support. He, as David said, he was a very good doctor, and if you go on the streets of Pushkin, like maybe not every other, but every third person could greet him on the streets. Some of his patients kept in touch with him for many, many years. I remember that one of his patients came to our wedding and helped us to arrange our wedding when they become adults already. And as David said, this chocolate cake for New Year was coming for decades from grateful grandparents. And he saved their grandson from meningitis, which was very difficult to do, like 50 years old and 50 years ago in Russia. But it was all diagnosed and treated in time. And I think the doctor it was influenced my brother's decision who to become in life. And that's why we went to medical school and essentially became doctors. The most important thing he taught me when I live close to him is that you cannot give up on yourself, ever. He came here at 62, learn English, read American history books, solve Sudokus only with 4 stars, hard level, learned computer at 80s, walked miles on his treadmill until his heart condition didn't stop letting him to do it. And even at the end, as kids say, he chose surgery with maybe 1 chance of success over finishing his life in a nursing home on life support. He drove his car. He would love to drive it far away from home, but here I had to put a limit to it and let him drive himself only to the drugstore or to the food store. He did historical trivia with his grandchildren, and sometimes was almost won. Maybe the difference was 1 point when he lost. He loved this country. He was very grateful for what this country gave him in his last 30 years of life. So he had life full of this last 30 years, his life was full of love, great travels, he experienced new foods, and he had also this new experience like voting, real voting, and travel first class. So though he didn't even realize what first class in an airline travel means. His greatest pride and joy were all of his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren, their achievements. He loved every minute he spent with them, being it a babysitting or defending David, or just very rare but very nice vacations together. And all of it was my father who helped me and loved me unconditionally. And it's very painful to feel that his place is now empty.
Our condolences. We're going to switch now to presentations from Zoom. So for those who are Zooming, please listen to me carefully. Give me a minute to transfer the equipment over so those in the sanctuary can properly see and hear you. And then I'll give you a sign on Zoom. Our speakers will begin with Alex, with Sasha in St. Petersburg. Our second speaker from Zoom will be Nadia. Our third speaker from Zoom will be Alex in New Jersey. And our fourth speaker will be Boris. So give me a minute to transfer over, and then we will begin with Alex in St. Petersburg.
Папочка. Лена сказала на самом деле очень многое, и мне очень жаль, что я сейчас не рядом с вами. Но когда я вспоминаю все, что было с папой, на самом деле, в основном, это какие-то вещи такие очень добрые, очень хорошие, а иногда, может быть, по-хорошему такие, по-детски хулиганские. Очень странно, но я почему-то вспомнил, как Лена говорила, что папа занимался с мамой нашим воспитанием, водили нас, если те, кто жили в Советском Союзе, помнят эти театральные абонементы, мы ходили в театр, и однажды мы были с папой на одном из спектаклей и сидели прямо над барабанами. А у меня была огромная книжка, те, кто ее помнит, Тилюлиншпигель, толстая-толстая, и мне так хотелось ее бросить на эти барабаны. Единственное, что у меня удержало, это не то, что будет какая-то негативная реакция, а то, что папа сказал: Саш, нам могут книжку не отдать. Вот на самом деле такой вот взгляд на многие вещи, он очень и очень интересный был. Выбор профессии, да, мы, конечно, пошли по пути мамы и папы, но я на всю жизнь запомнил. Я знал, что если, например, папа приходит с работы и у него желтые пальцы, значит, в то время не было перчаток, они делали пункции, люмбальные пункции. Он сам ставил плевральные дренажи, они просто обрабатывали руки йодом. И ничего другого тогда, в общем-то, и не было. Его интересы огромные, и это, конечно, удивительное дело, что ему хотелось сделать очень много, ему хотелось увидеть очень много. Я помню, действительно, Лена вспомнила про лугу, да, Надюшка тоже это помнит, когда он пытался выращивать клубнику. Я никогда не думал, что вот эти вот 5 дней работы, или там 6 дней тогда работы врача-педиатра, которые могли выматывать, а потом садиться на машину, всех нас вывозить поздно вечером в пятницу на дачу, и оставшиеся 2 дня вместо того, чтобы отдыхать, сидеть, копаться, там чего-то постригать, ну и получать от этого огромное удовольствие. Когда появилась возможность видеть мир, он, конечно, хотел видеть как можно больше. И я думаю, он очень счастлив, потому что он увидел то, что хотел, он увидел выросших нас, он увидел выросших внуков, он видел правнуков. И у него было, конечно, очень и очень много планов. Даже когда мы разговаривали по телефону, это был, ну, по WhatsApp, это был каждая суббота или каждое воскресенье, вот, как только я замечал, что у него что-то не так, либо дыхание какое-то не то, либо губы синие, он тут же уходил от этого и на эту тему старался не говорить. Вот. Ну, правда, спасибо огромное, Тома, Юра, Леночка, за то, что эти дни последние вы были рядом. Я с вами не был. Папочка, спасибо тебе за все. Простите.
Дядя Юра, дорогой, лишнее говорить, каким ты был человеком, сильным, развитым, всем интересующимся, добрым, поддерживающим всех. Я хочу сказать, кем ты был для меня. К сожалению, при жизни мы не говорим эти вещи. Я могу только сейчас тебе высказать это. И невозможно все высказать, все чувства, которые ты подарил мне, все воспоминания. Одни из первых у тебя в больнице. Я лежу на отделении, кругом дети. И вот появляешься ты с врачами, с сестрами, все вокруг. Ты что-то объясняешь, все смотрят на тебя, записывают. И тут я, 7-летняя, подхожу к тебе и говорю: Юра, и твоя добрая, заботливая улыбка ко мне: Надюшка. И все сразу понятно и легко. И до сих пор на 7-м десятке я слышу твою: Надюшка. Мало кто уже ко мне так обращается. Я чувствую себя тем самым ребенком, о котором ты всю жизнь заботился. Ты был для меня вторым отцом. Всегда, всегда, везде. Ты думал, как помочь мне тихо, незаметно. Я даже не знала этого до какого-то периода. И потом в Израиле, в далеком Израиле, когда нам всем, нашей дружной большой семье, стало так тяжело, нас разбросало по разным странам, и мы справляли наши праздники отдельно. Я знала всегда, что в любом состоянии, в любое время ты сядешь на самолет и прилетишь ко мне, как ты это делал и на мои 50 лет, и на Леночкину свадьбу. И никогда не знала я, как тебе было тяжело. Ты всегда улыбался, всегда был спокоен, всегда поздравлял и улетал. Ты гордость всех нас, всей нашей семьи Мушкиных. Ты объединял нас всегда, ты заботился обо всех вместе и о каждом. Твоя любовь, преданность, такого просто нет у всей семьи. Даже сейчас, когда ты уже уходишь от нас, мы все вместе тебя провожаем. Посмотри, сколько людей тебя любят. Можно многому у тебя было учиться. И так трудно принять свою эстафету. И я очень рада, что у меня есть старший брат и сестра, которые должны принять твою эстафету и продолжать твой путь. Ты оставил мне таких чудесных людей, которых я очень люблю, как и тебя. Я всегда буду помнить, любить тебя. И всегда в моей душе будет звучать твой поддерживающий голос: Надюшка. Спасибо тебе за все.
Дядя Юра был очень родным, близким и любимым человеком в нашей семье. для моих родителей и для меня. Я его помню столько, сколько я помню себя. Моя первая о нем память, наверное, с того времени, когда ему было 29 лет. И от 29 до 92 лет он остался тем же. Он мало в чем изменился. Энергичным, любящим жизнь, самоотверженно преданным своей семье и всем своим близким. Человеком с колоссальным кругозором и кругом интересов. Уже говорили про книги по истории. Я их иногда открываю и читаю с интересом. И, конечно, он был человеком остроумным и мудрым. Он немало афоризмов от него вышло, но один из них мы вспоминаем в нашей семье, ну, наверное, через день. Он сказал это моему папе лет 60 назад. Он сказал, 1 ребенок – это недостаточно, а 2 – это слишком много. И, в общем, мы на своем опыте это ощутили. Дядя Юра, в общем, несмотря на сравнительно невысокий рост, даже по мушкинским стандартам, он был гигантом. И таким я его помню и буду помнить всегда, и таким он навсегда останется в моем сердце. Нам будет очень его не хватать. Вечная ему память.
Ladam, you're next.
Thank you. I will speak in Russian. Я только хочу сказать, что с уходом дяди Юры уходит мое детство. Это очень тяжело. Тяжело выразить. Я прекрасно помню эти заседания в Пушкине, эти встречи. Шикарные встречи здесь, в Израиле. А когда мы приехали в Америку и попали на 80-летие дяди Юры, как он выступил. Он встал и сказал, считайте меня патриархом. В тот момент он был старший из Мушкиных. И мы думали, что патриарх будет всегда. Всегда будет с нами. Я не знаю, как это работает, но в этом году они ушли оба, и Марик, и Юра. Это очень грустно. Мы всегда будем любить, всегда будем помнить. Наша семья как семья двоюродная для Мушкиных. У нас тоже очень много рассказов и про Юру, и про Марика. Когда в нашей семье были проблемы со здоровьем у взрослых, звонили Марику. Когда были проблемы со здоровьем у детей, звонили Юре. Нам, конечно, страшно повезло, что эта династия продолжается. Когда у нас проблемы, мы звоним Наденьке. Когда у наших детей проблемы, они уже звонят Леночке. Этот клан громадный, любимейший наш, потерял сегодня одного из своих столпов. Но мы будем всегда помнить и всегда любить. Спасибо.
Boris, I will ask you to unmute. Good. Please continue.
Знаете, в жизни вот бывают моменты истины. Вот у меня от Марика, к примеру, как-то вроде одна фраза, он мне сказал, научись читать между строк. И это мне открыло целый мир. А Юра, такой тоже момент, он у меня пока остался. Я как бы по возрасту следующий, что можно быть мягким человеком, но решать очень больше, чем более жесткие люди. Мы как-то пошли на экскурсии были в Эрмитаже, Юра и много родственников. И так вышло, что-то к нам не выходил экскурсовод, что-то все растерялись. Один Юра молча там кому-то шепнул, и все стало на свои места. То есть это так вот скромно, тихо, но решающе. И это мне помогло. Я как бы стал, это принял на вооружение в своей жизни. То есть не уходят люди, как вот Саша сказал, это тяжело, ну, прощание такое, конечно, это тяжелое, но остались не только дети, живые люди, но и остались его идеи, как бы. Я ему очень благодарен во многом в своей жизни. Это мне помогло. Дай Бог, может быть, это оценят и мои потом наследники. Так что эстафета не прерывается.
Thank you. Спасибо. Please rise for the memorial prayer. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure. To Dr. Yuriy Mushkin, Uri ben Velvavashena, who has returned to his eternal home in you. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. El Malei Rachamim, Shochim Ba'amiromim, Amse Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Ma'alot Kedoshim, Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazirim, Nishmat Uri ben Velvavashena, Shahalach Le'olamo, Began Eden Tehemenuchato, Ana Baal Harachamim, Astireu Beseder Knafecha Le'olamim, Utzror Bitzror HaChayim, Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachlato, V'yanuach B'Shalom, Al Mishkavo, V'nomar Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, just a reminder that we will not be going in a formal procession to the cemetery. Once the casket leaves the sanctuary, we ask that you go directly to your cars and proceed to the cemetery. There are directions outside in the lobby on the table And then we'll start the interment service when you arrive. At this time, I'd like to ask for the pallbearers.
Following the casket will be family first, and then everyone else, we follow after them.
Влада, Саша, Надюшка, Боря. Спасибо вам. Ой, я не вижу, кто сейчас еще там. Ой, все.
25 человек, Саш.
Мгм.
Прими наши соболезнования. Мы
Мгм.